She called the cops and said I was cheating, while the whole class was still watching. The marker was still in my hand when Professor Hale laughed and shook his head. "You know what?" he said, loud enough for everyone. "Since you're so confident, solve this." He turned to the board and wrote an equation so long it filled 2 lines. Numbers, symbols, stuff most people had never even seen. Some students started whispering. One guy behind me muttered, "That's impossible." I felt the room shift, like everyone was waiting for me to fail. Hale folded his arms and smiled. "Take your time," he said. "We don't want to embarrass you." I looked at the board, then at my notebook. My heart was calm, not because I was brave, but because I had seen harder problems when I was 15, sitting in my mom's kitchen, learning from old math books she found at a thrift store. I stood up and walked to the board. Hale tilted his head. "You sure you want to try?" he asked. "You can sit back down if this is too much." A few people laughed. I didn't answer. I just started writing, at first slow, then faster. The room went quiet. The whispers stopped. I could feel eyes on my back, phones coming out. Someone even started recording. Hale's smile faded. He stepped closer, trying to follow my steps, but I saw it in his face. He was already lost. Halfway through, he cut me off. "That's not the right method," he said quickly. "You're doing it wrong." I paused, looked at him, and said, "No, sir. Your method is just longer." The line I wrote next made him freeze. He grabbed the marker from my hand and checked the board. His face went pale. This isn't possible," he whispered. A girl in the front row gasped. Someone said, "Wait." "He's right." Hale suddenly straightened up and said loudly, "Class dismissed." Then he turned to me and said in a low voice, "Stay here." When everyone left, he locked the door and called campus security. I heard him say, "I think this student hacked something. There's no way he solved that on his own." I looked at him and laughed. "You set an impossible problem to mock me," I said softly. "Now you're scared because it worked." He didn't know it yet, but that equation wasn't even close to the hardest thing I'd solved this week, and the real problem was just starting. The security officers came in like they were expecting a criminal. One of them asked for my student ID, the other stood near the door with his hand on his radio. Professor Hale started talking fast. He accessed restricted material. That equation was from a closed faculty archive. There's no way he solved it without cheating. I didn't even get mad. I just felt tired. I pulled out my phone and said, "You mean this?" and showed them a photo. It was a page from a worn-out notebook, dated 3 years ago. Same type of problem, same structure. One of the officers squinted. "Where did you get that?" I said, "From my mom's old storage box. She used to tutor college kids before she passed." Hale laughed nervously. "That proves nothing. They took me to the dean's office anyway. On the way, students were staring like I was in trouble for something serious. Someone whispered, 'He really hacked the system?' Another said, 'Nah, that professor always hates him.' When we sat down, the dean looked at me and said, 'Be honest. Did you use outside help?' I shook my head. 'No, sir. I just solved it,' Hale cut in. 'He's lying.' I set that problem to expose him. It's designed to fail." The dean leaned back and said, "Then let's test him again." They brought in another professor from the math department. Older guy, quiet, didn't smile much. He wrote a new equation, even longer than the first. Hale smirked like he'd won. The older professor looked at me and said, "You don't have to do this." I picked up the marker anyway. This time I didn't rush. I wrote slowly, explaining each step. The older professor nodded after every line. Hale started sweating. Halfway through, he said, "Stop! This is a waste of time." The older professor turned to him and said, "No, this is the most interesting thing I've seen in years." When I finished, the room was silent. The older professor checked the board, then checked again. He laughed under his breath. "This is correct," he said. "And not just correct, it's elegant." Hale's face dropped. The dean looked at him. "You accused this student of cheating, twice, on no evidence." Hale tried to speak, but nothing came out. The dean said, "Leave, we'll talk later." Hale walked out without looking at me. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. That night, my car was towed from campus parking. The next morning, my student portal was locked. Then I got an email saying I was under investigation for academic misconduct, and unauthorized system access. I laughed when I read it, not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what my mom warned me about. When people feel small, she used to say, they try to make you disappear. I went to the admin office. They told me I couldn't attend classes until the investigation ended. No timeline, no explanation. Just wait. I walked out and saw Professor Hale standing across the hall, talking to another faculty member. He looked at me and smiled. Not a happy smile, a quiet one.